Well, first of all, ACLU, for how long you've been there?
I started January 2019.
So policy strategist, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, so a policy strategist, we do a plethora of things, and so technically we are registered lobbyists. So we have to register through the state, and we're lobbyists. But it also means writing policies and bills at the state level and doing some work at the local level. Also organizing and coalition building. And so really a policy strategist is looking at an issue, what are the issues that we have, and what is the best thing and the best way to change the laws around that issue area.
Let's talk about where your heart is. You have worked with youth and families for how long, and is that your real passion?
That's my passion. You know, it's definitely a sense of joy that I feel when I'm able to connect with young people and families. And you know, growing up, I had a mentor when I was in middle school, Khalil Baker, and he's actually still my mentor. And that connection that I had with him is something that is near and dear to me. And so I've always been drawn to working with young people. I think that when we're talking about young people, they're our most vulnerable population. They are created and put in environments and systems that they have no control over. And so for me, pouring into them, giving them the knowledge and teaching them about my life experiences is just a passion. And I've always been able to connect with young people. I would prefer to be with young people at all times.
So what was it about Khalil? You said you were in 8th grade? Was that what you
Yep,
said at the
middle
time?
school.
So what was it that was the connection with him that you said, okay, this is somebody I trust? And what did he do for you as a mentor?
Yeah, so we were in a program at Berea. It was through Berea College. It was called Partners in Prevention. And so we did tutoring on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They took us bowling. They took us on college visits. And he was around, I mean, he was in college. And so you had someone who had very same experiences of growing up or life experiences that was able to connect. And I saw he's in college. Oh, I can go to college. These things are possible. And I think that just his authenticity and him giving himself, he didn't have to do that. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy because there was a couple other folks, Rashad. It's crazy. I met Rashad years ago through Berea College, and so I think that the power...
Now, Rashad, who used to be with the city?
With the city,
oh,
yes.
Okay.
And so I think there's power in building those relationships early with young people, that is what, along the way, makes sure that young people have the thing that they need to succeed.
With young people now, and we look at crime rates, we look at disparity, we look at inequities, are we failing our young people? Where do you see, how are we doing with that?
I mean, absolutely, I think we're failing our young people. I think that that's very complex. I think that until we really start investing in communities, when I say investing in communities, changing the way a community looks and investing in the people in that space, I think that we're going to continue to see this trend. For instance, I went out of town to LaGrange for a week just to get out of the city. Mm-hmm. And I took a couple of days off, and then I started to work. And during those days, my mind was fresh. I was able to get things done. But then when I came back home to my apartment, my mind was blocked again. And it made me realize that your environment that you live in, the space that you occupy, really impacts the way we wake up and how we do things. And
the struggle every day.
I've outgrown my apartment, so it's time for me to move. And so it's so small that it's like, okay, I've got, I don't have enough space anymore, and so I need to move. But it was just that little thing of showing people's environment, the environment that you're in really impacts your mental health. And so I think about a young person who wakes up and doesn't have access to food, or is seeing buildings that are abandoned and all of these things in their community. They see that day in and day out. What does that do to someone's mental?
Right. Let's talk about that. So this is how your passion, but what we know you for most recently is Breonna's Law. And how did that, where you were really the one who led the charge to get no-knock warrants banned in Louisville, how did that land in your lap when you were thinking of youth and everything? How did you go from where you are now to being the one to really push Breonna's Law through in the city?
Yeah, I think the first thing that's important is when I started working at ACLU, it was on a contract base to fight the school safety bill of putting police officers in schools in Kentucky. And so that was my first task at ACLU, was fighting that. And I was the only person in Frankfurt that was saying, no, we don't need police in our schools. And so for the last 2 sessions, that was the main work that I did. And so when I found out about the death of the murder of Breonna Taylor, I was literally on a call. It was about 30 people on the call, local people and national people. And folks were kind of talking about who they were and their role and what they were going to do when it came for justice for Breonna. And for whatever reason on the call, I said, well, I'll work on the policy. I'll change and ban no-knock warrants.
Like that.
Just like literally, and I was like, did I just say that out loud? And so literally that was how it happened. And I had no idea. I never looked at no-knock warrants before. And so it was that moment that I had to start doing research and talking to a couple of people of like, what do we need to do to get this done here? And I believe that at the time someone on the call had talked about Oregon and had talked about that Houston had made some type of change. And that's where I started and went from there.
And then in what span of time, because they're now banned in the city of Louisville, how long did that work take for you?
Yeah, so we actually launched a campaign, no more no-knocks. We launched the campaign, I believe we sent out the email May 23rd, and it was that Wednesday that we asked people to wear these t-shirts, make a video to ban and end no-knock warrants in the city. And from that day, I think it was on that Wednesday, I guess that would have been the 27th, from the day it passed, June 11th, it was 16 days that we were able to do that.
That's crazy.
I mean, it's wow. And I think that what happened was, the goal was to write a piece of policy to get community partners to look at it and say, no, we need to change this, we need to change that. That was the idea of it. And so once I started drafting, I found out that Metro Council, that Councilwoman Barbara Sexton Smith and Councilwoman Green were working on something. And I called them, and Barbara Sexton Smith said, well, we're going to file something at the end of the week. And I was like, no, don't do it. Like, wait, let's slow down. And she said, give me what you got. And so what we had literally was, we had written something, and it was only 2 people who had looked at it. And so we gave that to them, and they took what we wrote and combined it with what they had. And what's crazy at the end of the day, the language that we were fighting to get out of the original law was language that we wrote. And so I think that's policy is not this straight line thing. Right. It's you go here, you go there. And we can do something, but it's just like, okay, I can look at something for 24 hours, but I need a fresh eyes or a fresh mind to look at it to make sure that I'm not leaving things out.
So that collaboration. So what did that process teach you then?
It taught me that we have to work together. We have to collaborate. It also taught me that leadership means that anybody can do it. It taught me that a regular, ordinary person can really make change. It also taught me that it's the will of the people. It taught me that at the end of the day, we as people, as individuals, we really have the power.
I think that's a huge lesson that I've seen on your social media, that in the mirror, right? The person in the mirror is the one who can be that change agent. Yeah,
and it's we as individuals, anybody can change anything. If that's your passion or if that is what it is that you want to change, it's just a matter of you setting your mind to it and saying, I can change this because I know about it or because I'm passionate about it. And I think that that is what like really was like a ding 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 moment, a aha moment,
exactly.
as Oprah would say, a aha moment.
I love those aha
Yeah,
moments.
yeah. I think that that's, that's what it was for me, was that I can, you can really do anything. And one thing I think that it's important is that our own life experiences make us qualified. And I think that one of the reasons why I love working with young people as well is that some of our kids, especially in our city, have gone through the most challenging things. But it's those situations that make them qualified to be the next leaders.
They've been there.
They've been there. They know it. They understand it. They lived it. They've lived things that I've never lived. And so they are qualified to do what I do. They're qualified to do more than what I do. And so for me, it's how do we help people heal from those experiences and get them to know that they're qualified, and so that their kids or the next generation doesn't have to deal with the same things that they did.
And I know that's been a priority to you, the healing of it, and then the leadership role of it with young people, that you're working with that as well. So Breonna's Law is in effect now in the city of Louisville. You're one of the masterminds behind it. Now we're looking at getting it done in the state, and I know Attica's kind of leading that charge. Are you hopeful it will pass in the state?
Yeah, I'm definitely hopeful. I think that we know that that is a priority. We've heard Republicans talk about it. We've heard Democrats talk about it. We've heard people in the Senate and in the House talk about it. And so I'm very hopeful. I think the issue is that what is it going to look like? What is that final version of the bill? But I'm very hopeful. It's going to be a lot of work. And I think also if it's a matter of when it happens, right? And so I think that it's important that if we don't get what we want, if it's not a complete ban of no-knock warrants, unless it's those emergency exigent circumstances, and adding some of these other things, I believe that if it's not that, that's not what we want. That's not going to save human lives. And when you look at the purpose of Breonna's Law, and you look at the purpose of banning no-knock warrants, the purpose is to save human life. We heard Tom Wine talk about it. We heard him talk about that there's no amount of drug money or evidence worth a human life. And when you look at no-knock warrants and the dangerousness of them, that is the thing for me that I want to do, is make sure that we are banning practices and tactics that puts everybody in danger, not just the community, but also our police officers. It's important.
So we'll see what happens with that. I wanted to ask you, you've been so involved with the protests that have been going on in the aftermath of all of that. Where do you think we are? How would you rate Louisville when it comes to racial equity? A C, a D, an F?
Honestly, we're at an F. I don't think that the city has learned. When I say the city, I mean leadership, business leaders, individuals. I don't think that as a collective, we've learned and understood not only what has happened this summer with Breonna Taylor and the aftermath of everything else. You had Breonna Taylor, then you had David McAtee, then you had Tyler Gerv, and then this recently
With Travis?
With Travis. And so I don't think that the city understands the connectedness of those things, right? And how that one thing has impacted everything else. But I think that until we as a city, and I say we, some of the things happened before you and I were even here, born, or even knew or understand what it was. But we have literally created a divide in our city, the 9th Street divide. And we said, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to do? What do we need to do? And we've talked about it. We've studied. We've done this and we've done that. But the city still has not invested in the people.
Here we are.
Here we are.
We're sitting at the 9th Street divide right now.
We're sitting at the divide right now, and there's construction. And, and what's happened is this city has created a city and a town for everybody else but the people who live in the city. Louisville wants Louisville to be this tourist in this pretty place, and you come in and visit and do this and do that, but you have a place where there's people within 5 miles walking that is not for them.
So how do we get past that? Do you see hope? Because, I mean, for a while I did, and now it's like, are we just settling back into where we were? Have we moved the needle at all with everything that's happened in 2020?
I mean, I definitely think that we've moved the needle as far as people are aware. But I think the biggest part is what are people willing to do? And I think that when you look at black folks, I feel like that we've sacrificed a whole lot. But I think what has happened is that you have a lot of white influential people in the city. And it's like, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to do to change these things? And it's not necessarily giving up something for someone else, but it's how are you willing to like look and reflect inside and even acknowledge the way individuals or other people, like how you have been complicit to some of the things that's happened in the city. And so I definitely think it's going to take new leadership. I think it's going to take bold, young leadership. And I wouldn't even say it's radical. It's not even radical leadership. It's new leadership. It's leadership of saying we're not going to continue with the status quo.
Fresh eyes.
Fresh eyes. You know, we're not going to operate out of this capitalistic mind frame. Is that at the end of the day, we want to make sure people's basic needs are met. We have so many abandoned buildings in this city. So many people that are homeless. So many people who are without. Like, why is that?
Right. I mean, the inequity.
Yeah, and it's basic. Like, we're not talking about, I need this from you, I need that from you. It's like, why can't we make sure that people's basic needs are being met?
So when you talk about that fresh eyes, I have to ask, is there any run for you in the future with political office? Has this, as she gets that grin, has this inspired you in any way, especially now that you go, you know what, I can do this?
Yeah.
So is political office something that you would want?
I've had a lot of people ask me that. I've had a lot of people ask me to run. I've had young people ask me to run. And I think that someday, I'm not sure when the timing is right, but there's something that I feel like that is needed right now in the city with young people. And so I'm also trying to figure out and understand, like, what is it that I need to be doing to get back in the community, to reach and teach our young people and connect with them more.
So what would you say, because the violence in this city, the crime rate is just devastating. And so much of it, you know, from really young people.
Yeah.
What are answers? What are your thoughts about that? Because that just breaks my heart when I see it. And then you go, okay, why is that? And like you said, very complex. It's environment. It's all of these things that we've talked about, right?
Yeah, I mean, my wheels turn on that every day. Is like, what do we do? How do we end it? And it's a very complex question. I think at the basic for me, it's how do we make sure people have their needs met, their basic needs met, and then also how are we making sure that people are healing? There's been a lot of trauma that's happened this summer, and I think that at the end of the day, at the base of it, is that we have to start healing from some of that. We have to heal as individuals, which is another reason why I feel like that I need to be spending more time with young people, is that we have to heal and like, and then you have COVID, and so like we're in our house and in our space, and we think
crazy.
that this is what things are, and like it's very complex. And I think that it's going to take a lot of healing. I think it's going to take a lot of transforming what communities look like, and again making sure that people have their needs met. I mean, you look at generational when you're talking about how far we have come. When you look at the generational harm that's been on communities. I mean, you look at Beecher Terrace, for example. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a community that I think at one point in time, 1 in every 3 people had contact with the police. And so you have a community who's had impact or been touches with the police, whether the community's been over-policed or whatever. And then the city says, we're going to get rid of Beecher Terrace. We care about the property. We care about the space here in Beecher Terrace, but we don't care about the people. And so we're going to pour all this money into this area, but we're going to put the people out. And so what does that say? Like, what does that say to an individual when you look at generations, 3 or 4 or 5 generations who lived in an area, and then you say, okay, the city's about to put all this money here and change the structure of what this space looks like, but you know what? We can't be there.
But
you have to go. What does that say to someone? What does that do to someone's psyche?
Disposable.
Absolutely. And so we have to call that out. It's not urban renewal or revitalization. Like, that's not what that is. We have to call it out for what it is, and then also make sure that we are giving those people the things that they need.
Go back for a second when you brought up Travis, who was shot and killed and violence there. You were a mentor to him. He came to you for advice. What was the advice that you gave him?
Yeah, let me back up for a minute. I think one of the interesting things is that I looked up to Travis. And there were days and nights that we were protesting. And I wasn't certain of what was going on. It seemed unsafe. It was just a lot. It was chaos. And there was times I would look for him and I would go to him and I'd say, Travis, I need you to go lead. Like, what are we doing? What's happening? Travis would go in front and he would lead and he would say a chant or he would tell people what to do and he would go back into the middle of the march. And so I just want to say that because Travis was an inspiration to me.
So he was as much leading you.
Absolutely. And so he told me early on that he wanted to be a politician one day. He didn't know exactly what he wanted to do. And he talked about being a leader. And, you know, one of the things that I would tell him is just to continue doing what you're doing. And he asked, when we went to New York together, I guess a month and a half ago. And one day before one of the days before we were leaving out, he talked about he wanted to create a program called Keep Going. And he just talked about it. He was like, well, what do I got to do? And he's super excited. And I mean, he's everywhere, you know, this, and this. And we told him, just write it down. Write out what you want to do. Just write it out. And it'll happen. And so I think that Travis was special. I don't know. When I first interacted with him, I knew that he was special.
There was something.
There was something about you. You can just tell.
And
Travis,
all that he overcame.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he just, I did not know him. I just witnessed him in that role in a couple of marches that I attended.
Yeah.
I mean, it was this boundless energy and optimism of things can be better and we're going to make it happen.
Yeah. And when you look at, I knew a little bit about his life growing up, and I've been learning more in the last week. But when you look at his life and some of the things that he's gone through, when I say that I got to spend more time with young people, that they're the ones that's going to get us free. It's because people like Travis.
Kind of lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, I mean, several people talked about it. His mom talked about it at his funeral yesterday. One of his closest friends, Alex, talked about it. She knew him when he was in middle school. And so knowing and understanding that he went through so much as a young person, but seeing him flourish in this moment, and it's because he went through so much that he could stand in this moment. That he's had to be strong his whole life growing up, and then it was like this moment, he was able to use that strength and be that strength for everyone else. And so he was a real leader, and we lost something special.
And I know I've seen that keep going, that hashtag and the megaphone.
Yeah,
so I'm sorry for your loss because I know it struck deeply with you.
Yeah.
Let me ask about mentors for you. You had Khalil, you said at 8th grade. You and your sister are in very similar work.
Yeah.
So I said, was your mom in this kind of work? Where did this come from? You grew up in Richmond, Kentucky.
Yeah,
You said more country? Is it in the country,
Yeah.
you kind of said?
Well, in the city, but I say Richmond's the country.
Okay.
Yeah, I tell people, to me, it's the country.
To you,
Richmond's
it's
the country. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
what was it that your mom, did she inspire something? You said she talked about a lot of her life story.
Yeah.
And that seemed to have an impact.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, for one, my mother grew up with, it was 10 of them, so she had 9 brothers and sisters. And they actually grew up in a place in Madison County called Paintown. So she grew up in the country on a farm. And so I think just talking about their life experiences and very early on, I just knew that we weren't too far removed from racism and discrimination and different things like that. So I always knew. And then my mom worked in a factory growing up, the majority of, when we were younger. And she would talk about the struggles of being the only woman on a shift, and then also the only black person on the shift. So you're talking about the only black woman or black person on a shift in a factory full of white men. And she talked about what that did, the impact, and how difficult and emotional draining that was. And so there was that piece. And then there was a piece that there was always somebody living in our house. Like, my mother would take anybody in. She had friends who lived with us. Some of her friends lived with us. Family members lived with us. And we didn't have a lot growing up. We didn't have a lot. But she would always bring people in who needed. And
so those were lessons.
Those were lessons. Those were life lessons of, these are some of the things. But regardless of what you have, we have to take care of each other. We have to take care of our people. And I think that that's one of the things that was passed down to me, is like, now I'm making sure that I'm taking care of people. How do we take care of community?
You and your sister talk about that and go, what was that shaped us? Did she feel the same way?
Yeah, we did. And what's interesting is my sister, she's always been involved in the work. I think early on in middle school, I think she was advocating for something in school. But I also learned from my sister. She early on, her early days in college, she went to do some work with a union up in Syracuse. She came back to Louisville and was doing work with Community Farm Alliance, and so she was doing some work around fresh food and farm. And so I think it's all of those things. But yeah, me and Casa talk about it all the time. I never imagined myself in this area.
You didn't?
Never.
What did you think?
I didn't really know, honestly, growing up, but I never saw myself being an advocate in that type of way. My undergrad degree is in sport administration and marketing. I love sports. And so I actually thought that I was going to do some sports marketing and kick back and watch sports my whole life. And
so what changed? What was the moment where the change came and the road turned?
Yeah. I started working at Maryhurst. Early on after undergrad, I went out and did volunteered at a sports camp out there at Maryhurst. And that was the first time that I really intentionally worked with young people. And I fell in love with it. I tried not to fall in love with it. And I did that and ended up taking a full-time job out there. And Judy Lambeth is also someone I always looked up to, who recently retired from Maryhurst. But one of the things that she said to me that stuck with me was, we work with the kids that nobody else wants to work with. Mm. And so there would be times that we would get a kid on campus who was 11, 12 years old and had been through 30 placements. Wow. And you talk about the impact of what that means to, what that does to someone's soul, what that does to their mental. And so it was those words from her that the combination of the way my mother took care of community, that it's my job and my duty to work with our most vulnerable population. And I've always worked with kids in the foster care system and juvenile justice. I don't want to work, not that I don't want to work with the other kids, but you have some kids who are going to be all right regardless. Right. I love those kids and they're brilliant, but those aren't the kids I want to work with.
So what is it in your soul that replenishes, because that is such hard and taxing work, giving hope to people who don't have hope? Where does that come from in you? How do you rejuvenate?
I think one of the biggest things for me is I'm very spiritually grounded. I grew up in the church. I grew up in an AME church, and so every morning, and my sister laughs at me. She went out just this past a couple weeks when I went to LaGrange. She came out, but usually the first 30 minutes of my morning, I'm listening to gospel music and I'm singing gospel music, and so that's what grounds me. That's what grounds me.
I also saw you're dabbling in some art, and I have to say, I
Yeah.
saw one of your pieces, and it looked like a heart in the
Yeah.
center to me.
Yeah.
That piece spoke to me.
Yeah.
I mean, what did that one mean to you? I think you know which one I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
I do. I just recently did it, and I just started doing artwork. It's something that I've thought about doing, but that's another way that I've been expressing myself in the last few weeks. So I've got this tattoo here. It's a Sankofa, and it means reaching back or looking at the past, looking back. And so it was kind of almost like a Sankofa, but it just symbolizes like understanding and knowing where you came from, and that it's our come from that makes us, like I said earlier, makes us qualified for right now today. And so for me, it was, and also that we have to lead with love. I can't do this work without leading with love. It's heavy work.
It is heavy
And I
work.
feel like that it's that piece of humanity and love that is missing out of a lot of our spaces. And so for me, I'm trying to lead more into that. Growing up, it was difficult. Growing up in a single family home, my mother worked all the time. She either worked second shift, or she had a second job to make sure that we made it. My dad was in the military, so he traveled, wasn't engaged. And so I was very closed off as a young person. Mm-hmm. And so it's knowing that and that as kids, all we want is our parents. Like all we want is our parents, and we want to be loved. And when you look at like young kids, you look at a kid that's 3 or 4 years old, when they first start talking, one of the main things that they say is, look at me, look at me, look at me, mommy, look at me, auntie. And that's all that people want. People want to feel loved and want to feel supported. And so
and be seen.
Say what?
And be seen.
And be seen. And people want to be seen and be heard. And kids, when they first start talking, that's some of the first words that they say is, look at me.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
never
where-
really connected all that.
Yeah, and that's where they first get that first piece of self-esteem.
That validation.
That validation is that when they say, look at me, mommy, look at me, auntie, look at me, sissy, look at me. And that's where young kids get that first piece. And so for me, it's everything goes back to love. And how do we make sure that we're loving on each other, and that we're in everything that we're doing, that we're leading with love.
One last question. You just received a really big honor with leading with conviction. And one of your quotes was, leadership takes faith and courage, and I've learned that even if I'm afraid, it's okay to be afraid.
Yeah.
Is that one of the lessons of being a leader? What do you take with you after you get this Leading with Conviction award that you want to say leading means to you?
Yeah, you do it even when you're afraid and when you're unsure. And I think that we are the leaders that we're looking for. That it's up to us as individuals to make that change. And I think that historically, we've had these leaders be up on this high pedestal of they're this or they're that. And it's like, we have those same qualities. We're those people. And we are the people that is going to open up the world. And we have to decide what that is and what that looks like. And so for me, leadership is a lot. You're vulnerable. You have a whole set of eyes on you. It's a different set of pressure. And it's a lot. That's the piece about leadership that's hard for me, is that additional pressure. And people expect these things or want these things from you, or you're supposed to do these things. But but that's when you do it afraid. You do it anyway. I know that the kids need me to step up and do things. And so I know that I have to help be that voice, that I have to be the bridge, that I have to walk through some doors before other people are able to walk through them. that I have to have conversations that are hard, so someone else can have the conversation. But you do it anyway. And we are at a moment that we need bold leadership. And I think that we have to shape what that means, what leadership is. And I also think that I'm still learning what that is, and I'm still stepping into my leadership, and being okay with that. I think that that's the piece that I'm still working on, is that, okay, you are now this leader. You are now this person that people are looking to and looking for, and being okay with that. It's a lot of pressure.